Hi, and welcome to the show again. I was here in winter. Ordinarily, I'm in winter in Goa and parts of India. But this year, I stayed in Ukraine. Up to this year, the weather has been mild. Luckily for me, it was minus 29. So to say it was extreme is underestimating the word extreme. When I look round the forest now, it's very difficult to believe, with all the greenery and life, that it would ever be possible for it to appear again. My mind goes back to the legend of Persephone and Hades, and how the ancient Greeks associated this story with the dawning of new life. Also, how quite a lot of religious groups, including the Sufi, class Persephone as God. The logic's quite simple. She was taken away, the earth died, she came back, the earth came back to life again. However, I'm digressing. Why am I here? I do like spending time alone in nature. It has to be said. Since I was a child, I like it. But it takes me back to something which was fairly prevalent in Goa. And the thing that's prevalent in Goa is the silent retreat. I've often thought, what on earth is a silent retreat? Because if you're not trained in meditation, and if you don't understand how to discipline your mind, being stuck in a, virtual solitary confinement and not speaking to somebody, the mind is going to go haywire. This has been proven with incarceration. Many of the very sort of disturbed prisoners are put in a cell by themselves, and usually the cell is totally dark, and they have what they call prisoner's television. It's where the mind actually starts throwing up images, in much the same way that if you're stuck by yourself and you have an untrained mind, the same thing will occur. If we look at this from a Kabbalistic viewpoint, we are going from Malkuth into Yesod, the realm of illusion. However, there's other things that really I call into question, and that is, if you're needing to go away for 2 weeks to be on your own, realistically, how efficient is your method of spirituality? Think about that. When we're born, it takes at least 3 or 4 people to get you to come into this world. A doctor, a midwife, and your mother. Possibly your father's pacing outside, worrying like mad that you're going to be okay. So, we're not exactly solitary creatures from the onset. So what does that suggest about spirituality? Well, it suggests whatever spirituality you have has got to be able to blend in with your environment. If your spirituality does not blend in with your environment, my question is, why would you want such a spirituality? I mean, literally, anybody can join a monastery or a convent and sit and stare at the navel and say, I'm there. Well, what challenges do you have? oh, that's not the idea. Well, realistically, if you are totally concentrating on the self, which one would presume if you're living in a monastery, that's what you're doing, it borders more on the Luciferian idea of what enlightenment is. And I do find that quite worrying because, as I said, we're like it or lump it, we're born into a communal environment. There is no sort of periods of great emptiness unless you go looking for it. Ironically, as you get older, your world tends to get empty. I think if you haven't got the connection with your family, it can be quite disastrous. I think even with a strong connection with your family, it can still be disastrous. There are great periods where you're left on your own. Obviously, the mobile phone is really useful because you can talk to people literally from all over the world. You can use it to sort of go on the internet. You can, it stops you being restricted and lonely. So, where they say the mobile phone is not really that cool, I think if you live on your own and you use it sensibly, then it can be a lifeline because, there are certain communities, there are certain chats where you can at least voice your opinion. But going back to the stuck in a ashram or a monastery staring at your navel, maybe reading the odd religious text, I don't think it helps you in any way. You might find some solace from it, but I think the fact remains, if your religious backbone is so fragile that you need to run into the shadows to feel refreshed and energized, I think you have to call into question just how strong your spirituality is. I think it's quite strange that everything nowadays is about, oh, if you're by yourself, you're a badass. Well, realistically, if you're by yourself, you can very easily end up a victim. I understand the I'm by myself and I'm not a victim crowd are saying that I'm wrong. But in reality, we are communal creatures. Before the industrialization, our communal living was limited to about 150 people. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. So, this is our ancestry, but as we're getting more and more progressive, we're getting more and more solitary, and perhaps that could be read as a great part of us is missing. I don't think it's any mistake that quite a lot of young women nowadays do not want children, because the incessant demand that you become your own person and that you live by yourself and that you carve out your own living is thrust upon them. And realistically, if you look at it from the other way as well, is that if you're a guy and you're meeting a woman, if the marriage fails, it can be very costly and you can be paying it for years. So it's almost like there is some kind of social engineering to stop people meeting one another. That, coupled with the fact that it's so expensive to live nowadays, rent is astronomical, food is astronomical, and put on top of that a family, if you've just got a normal income, it's reasonably impossible to survive. But going back to the spirituality, you know, if you are having to run off, surely your spirituality is fairly weak. And if you're not able to communicate with people, or you're not able to find your own community, that has to say a great deal about yourself. Because we are communal, we are strongest when we are communal. It's not just me who thinks this. This isn't the rambling of some stupid old guy. This is backed up by probably one of the greatest thinkers of the sort of late 1800s, 1900s, Gurdjieff. He promoted this all the time. He suggested that we are only, if you like, coherent when we are in a group. And, you know, if you read the works of Ouspensky, it is something that he always aimed to do. And there was a lot of integrity in his planning. And he also was very adverse to somebody running off into a dark corner and staring at the navel. You know, he said that realistically, you know, meditation can be anything from chopping wood to writing a letter. It's interesting when I spend time in India. Like I said, this year I didn't, but usually for the last 10 years I've spent at least 6 months. And you speak to gurus. Gurus do these meditation sessions with people, and they all want to go deeper. And usually the advice is, no matter what the meditation system is quite simple. It's not to allow the mind to get distracted. But not only that, you have to discount what is not needed. I mean, realistically, anybody who tells you that they know how to meditate really needs to be thrown under a bus. I think it's very difficult to, if not impossible, to teach people how to meditate. You have to find your own meditation. My wife is a classic pianist, so her meditation is in playing. My meditation can be as simple as going for a walk or writing. It's not what you think it is. And as for the meeting of the higher mind, well, first, can you define to me what's the lower mind? It's all conjecture. There are higher states of consciousness. One will meet them during one's life. But realistically, to proclaim to the world that you are enlightened, I think is something of a misnomer. This was also handled by Jiddu Krishnamurti. He said the same thing. He said people would come up to him and tell him that they're enlightened. And he would just look at them blankly, because realistically, what does that actually mean? So, yes, I like going into the woods. Yes, I like being reflective. When I'm walking, I'm probably in a deep state of meditation. But I think running off into the dark and staring at your navel, especially if you're untrained in cultivating the mind and understanding what is illusion and what is reality, is a completely different ball game. For example, when one meditates deeply, the first thing to come through are the demons and the Djinn. This could be the Jungian shadow, or it could actually be the demons and the Djinn. However, to be in the state where you're not frightened and you just accept it and you're just like the mirror, this takes years of training. This isn't something you can just pick up like that. So if anybody tells you that they found themselves while on a silence meditation, I would be remarkably suspicious. They may have found some kind of relaxation. They may have found some kind of tranquil state within themselves. But as I said, if you are purely spiritual and you are a evolved person, I don't believe it's necessary to run off into the woods like I've done. I enjoy it, yeah, I do. But I don't see how me having thoughts of higher consciousness is really going to affect everyone around me. I think me holding integrity, honesty, and love towards other people is far more important than me holding integrity, knowledge, and love towards myself. I'm not suggesting that anything that I'm saying is correct, because that would be just indoctrination. I'm just putting the thoughts out there. I'm putting the thoughts out there as a lifelong occultist and somebody who spends at least 6 months in India with gurus and high adepts. One other thing that I want to mention before I go, the guy sat in the cross-legged position and the burning incense. It's a wonderful image. However, when I'm actually working with adepts, 99.9% of them lay in what the Buddhists call the corpse position, because to get into the state of meditation, to relax the body, to relax the mind, you have to go through so many distractions. And as for sitting there cross legs for hours on end, I'm not saying you can't do it. I know you can do it, but it doesn't seem to be that integral to the meditation process. And as I've mentioned, that most of the adepts I know lay in the corpse position, which is in yoga. They don't tie themselves in knots or do amazing positions. Interestingly, I met a yoga adept of something like 40 years, and I said to him, what do you get from it? And he was a very fit man. He said, I get fitness. I said, what about the higher mind? He says, when I close my eyes, all I get is blackness. And I think that illustrates the point. Unless you're actually trained to appreciate the steps of meditation, it's virtually impossible to learn it yourself. And the French guy I met in Goa, who'd been a yogaist for something like 40 years, illustrated that point to me. So before you run off into the dark or you lock yourself away, understand that if you're doing that, then your spiritual discipline may well be asking. And if it is asking, ask yourself, why is it asking? You know, why are you labeling people as toxic or negative? Generally speaking, when we label people, we're actually pushing forward what's in ourselves, or if you like, we're projecting. We're seeing the things inside of people that we really don't like about ourselves. And I think on that, I will say goodbye. If you're still awake and you haven't fallen to sleep, thank you for listening, and namaste.